But in general, there are several groups that you can go to for this sort of information on the topic we're covering tonight. And so that's Creation Ministries International. You'll see the website up there on the slide. Answers in Genesis, which is another great group. And then the Institute of Creation Research. Not as well heard of as the other two, but all great groups and all fantastic websites, so you can go and check them out and delve into more information. So when I talk about evolution and creation, evolution and religion, the first thing a lot of people say is, well, why are you trying to mix the two? You know, aren't they totally different spheres of existence, if you like? You know, evolution over here and religion over there, never the two shall meet. A bit like Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, never the two shall meet. So it's not heart to heart, I don't think, in my lifetime. So what do they have in common? Well, surprisingly, they have a lot in common. So consider this quote. The quote is, I've shortened it a little bit, but this is a true excerpt. So modern evolutionary biology tells us loud and clear that there are no gods, no purpose, no life after death, no ultimate foundation for ethics, no meaning to life, and no free will for humans either. Now, doesn't that sound like religious statements to you, or philosophical statements at the very least? So this guy is saying modern evolutionary biology says this. He's not talking about butterflies or sparrows. He's talking about this is what modern evolutionary biology tells us. So it sounds like a very strong religious connection. Somebody will say, well, who's the crackpot that said that? Obviously, somebody who's off the planet. Well, actually, the guy is off the planet now. He died a couple of years ago, unfortunately. His name's William B. Praveen. So William B. Praveen started off as a population geneticist. So that was his science-type background. He eventually became a distinguished professor of the history of biology at Cornell University. He was given the inaugural David Hull Prize from the International Society for History, Philosophy and Social Studies of Biology. I thought some of my business names are very long, but that's got to be longer. And so he's obviously somebody of great academic merit who is qualified in these fields to say about what evolutionary biology says in terms of being a religion. Now, this connection's made even clearer by a fellow called Michael Roos. Michael Roos started off in Guelph University up in Canada. I'm not sure how they pronounce it. It sounds like something out of the Lord of the Rings to me, Guelph University, just near the Mount Morecambe over there. But anyway, so he then went from there to Florida State University. Obviously, he loves the warmth, and he became the professor of philosophy there. He's got 3 honorary doctorates. So it's pretty amazing. You know, most people would be happy to get 1 honorary degree. He's got 3 honorary PhDs. And he said this, evolution is a religion. Evolution, it was true from the beginning and it was true today. I'll say it again. Evolution is a religion. It was true from the beginning. It is true today. So once again, who is this guy apart from what I just said? He's an atheist. He once was a Christian, he said. So he's not trying to stack the cards my direction. He's quite firm about this. So you can see that there's a strong connection between evolutionary biology and religion already. Now, I noticed that some people in the past weren't really sure, well, what does evolution mean? Well, classically, evolution is the belief that nothing by itself became something, that something had a big bang and became everything. Everything was non-living, and then that some of that non-living stuff became living, and from that living pond scum came parakeets and poets. From that living pond scum came microbes, macaws, and microbiologists, all by itself. So when we're talking about evolution, that's the process we're referring to. So we've talked about the connection between evolutionary biology and religion being a lot stronger than most people are taught when they study biology, evolutionary biology at school. Interestingly enough, not everyone wants to see this religion, evolution, be applied consistently. I found this really fascinating. So there's a guy called Clinton Richard Dawkins. Most people know him just as Richard Dawkins. Put your hand up if you've ever read anything that he wrote. Very good. Put your hand up if you've ever heard him speak. Yeah. Bring on YouTube, hey? And suddenly book sales go down. So Richard Dawkins said this, I am a passionate Darwinian. Now, what's a Darwinian? Darwinian is someone who believes in the evolutionary theory a la Darwin. He brought out a book in 1859, and that's really gotten a lot of impetus to the evolutionary movement. So I'm a passionate Darwinian, or evolutionist if you want to say. I'm a passionate Darwinian when it comes to science, when it comes to explaining the world, but, there's always a but I'm a passionate anti-Darwinian, i.e. anti-evolutionist, when it comes to morality and politics. Isn't that interesting? He's got a religious belief system, but he doesn't actually want to see it applied to the rest of the world. As a Christian, I love to see Christianity applied to the rest of the world, in the sense I'd love everyone else to experience the great joy and happiness that comes from knowing Jesus. I can't wait to help someone have a conversation about all of that. And I'd love to see schools teach it. I'd love to see that happiness and forgiveness invade politics. I'd love it to be everywhere. So I find this really strange that someone believes in a religion but they don't actually want it applied in anything to do with morality and politics. I noticed, interestingly enough, he separated morality and politics. It's a shame that they don't go hand in hand, isn't it? So contrast those very bleak views of the world, the bleak views of no God, no purpose, no ultimate foundation to ethics. In other words, you've got no basis in an absolute fashion for saying this is right and this is wrong. Somebody's idea of what's right and wrong is just as justified as somebody else's. That's what that viewpoint was saying, and that's what they mean when they say there's no ultimate foundation to ethics. Contrast that with the Christian message. There is a God. It tells you, and Genesis tells us what he was like and who he is. Genesis tells us about marriage, what that actually means. Genesis tells us about human life, that we're not actually just bits of slime that happen to grow up by killing all sorts of other creatures as we went up the way, that human life is sacred because we're made in the image of God. So it talks about who God is, what he's done, what the value is of human life, what is marriage. It tells us the origin of death and suffering. Every religion's got to try and explain death and suffering some way. Christianity has an explanation for that. And it talks about why Jesus died. It's interesting enough that many people will know the word the gospel, which is just an old-fashioned way, or a great way actually, to talk about the good news of Jesus. Many of us often start with Jesus, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense, because that part, starting at Jesus, is like starting in the middle. You've got to go right back to the beginning to make any sense of the picture about Jesus. So the beginning says that there was God who was a creator. He was a lot more than a creator. God didn't need to create because he was bored. So God is a creator, and that's a very essential thing about who he is, but it's not everything about who God is. So God is a creator. What sort of a creator is he? He's a good creator. He created everything perfect. Then man came along, who he also created, but man, being man and women, or mankind, or however you want to say it, we sinned. We decided that we wanted to be boss. And then from that, of course, meant the curse of the world, and a world that's running down. The good news is Jesus came along to offer us a solution. He died so that if we wish to, we can ask him to take our punishment that's due to us, so that we can get right with him in this life and live with him in the next life. And the beauty of that is that it's a free gift that he's offering. So you can see how the gospel of Jesus is very contingent on the very beginning part of the story. If you like, there's no good news unless you first tell people what the bad news is. So the interesting thing is that this connection between origins, or Genesis if you're a Christian and believe in Genesis being the origins of everything, this connection between origins and Genesis is not gone amiss to atheists. I notice on the web more and more that atheist websites talk about there's this direct connection. Why do they do that? They talk about it because they love to say that the origins that we paint is absolute bull dust, absolute nonsense. And so because they've destroyed that origins foundation, then it doesn't matter what we say about Jesus, it's irrelevant. So the atheists are drawing out more and more about the logical flow that goes through history that puts Jesus in somewhere in a position of importance. Now, Madeleine O'Hare, she was the first president of AA. Now, that's not Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the American Atheist Association. So she was their inaugural president. And she's got a quote up there that you can see. And at the bottom, you'll note that she says that without Adam falling, in other words, without Adam choosing to do the wrong thing, to tell God that I don't need to follow your laws, without Adam falling, there wouldn't be original sin. What's original sin? Well, that's simply a fancy way of saying that when we're born, we're not born in harmony with God. We have a propensity to want to keep moving away. Any of you have had children, you know your children make great use of the word no much earlier than they make great use of the word yes when they're growing up. True? Yeah, and some of you will have grandchildren, be experiencing it all again, second time round, lucky you. So there's this original sin. So Madeleine O'Hare was saying, therefore, if there wasn't Adam sinning, there wouldn't be original sin. Therefore, there'd be no need for a redeemer or a rescuer. That's what Jesus is. And if there's no need for a rescuer, Christianity's got no purpose. And she said that a long time ago. She's dead too. It's very sad, isn't it, that people in Christian circles sometimes don't realise why their message isn't so powerful. It's because they tend to start off in the middle and they've not explained everything going back in time. Now, I hope you see that, therefore, this evolutionary religion is somewhat at odds with the Christian religion. It might have closer connections with some other religions, but it's got great conflict with the Christian religion. So trying to mix the two religions is going to be difficult, isn't it? We call that syncretism. For those of us that have been in third world countries, we often apply syncretism to people who are trying to mix, say, animism and Christianity, or mix Buddhism and some other aspect of some other religion. So we call that syncretism. We do it more subtly in the West. So, it's not so obvious. But it's going to be a dangerous thing trying to mix the religion of evolution with the religion of Christianity. It's a difficult and a dangerous thing is what I propose. An example of this is Charles Templeton. Put your hand up if you've ever heard of him. Yeah, thanks, Ralph. Great. So Charles Templeton, he was kicking around with Billy Graham. And in fact, from my reading, he was the one who got Billy Graham a leg up. He was a very popular preacher. He went to one town in America, and out of the 128,000 people in the town, out of the 128,000 people in the town, 91,000 people turned up to his crusades. Isn't that awesome? It's over 70%. Some people said that when he spoke, around 150 people would become Christians a night. So wonderful. But that didn't persist. He tried to mix them. And so he, in 1996, wrote a book, Farewell to God. My Reasons for Rejecting the Christian Faith. It's a bestseller. It's quite popular, as all those sort of books would be. So it's very sad. He had a lot of reasons for rejecting the God that he once loved, but certainly a big part of that was his trouble trying to mix the two religions. He saw them both being true and eventually decided that evolutionary biology religion was more true than Christianity, and it trumped. I would suggest that his spiritual death is what we'd say about someone who once was a Christian and seems to have moved away. That spiritual death was based on his view of a physical death. So if you look into it, he decided to accept the evolutionary history about death in the past. So in evolutionary religion, evolutionary beliefs, death is an absolutely necessary thing. There's no progress from those pond scums up to parakeets to poets without lots of creatures having to die and be exterminated on the way. So that historical view of death killed his Christian view of death, which is what? That death is an intruder. So if you read 1 Corinthians 15 verse 26, it says death is our enemy and it will one day die. And so as Charles Templeton's view of death, the evolutionary history of death, killed his Christian view of the history of death. I would say there's another reason for his spiritual death. Evolution teaches that death will always be with us. As long as there's life, there will always be death. So looking forward, what does the Christian view say? Well, you can probably guess already. The Christian view said that there one day won't be death for us sentient beings, us beings that have the breath of life, the nefesh chayesh, as it says in the Bible. One day there won't be that death. So once again, his future view of death killed his future view of the Christian idea of death. Does that all make sense? Great. So what is the Christian view of death based on in the future? Well, there's some wonderful verses in the Bible. You know, John 11 verses 25 and 26, where Jesus says, I'm the resurrection and the life. He who comes to me will live even though he dies. It's an extraordinary statement. And so you can see that he's a life-giving God. So that's John 11 there. And in John 10 verse 10 he said, I've come that you may have life and have it abundantly. In 1 Thessalonians, these are New Testament books, 1 Thessalonians 4 verse 14 it says, we believe that Jesus died and rose again, and one day all the rest of us who are asleep, who are dead, will rise with him. And so there's a very big difference in the future of the world, depending on whether you believe in the evolutionary religious idea or the Christian religious idea. And then finally, I think the other thing that was responsible for Charles Templeton's spiritual death was what it did to his understanding of who God is. Many religions grapple with how their God interacts or had any connection with the existence of evil in the world. The Christian view is very simple. There's a good and perfect God. He didn't create evil at all. He did create creatures with free choice. And so the view of the Bible is that this good and perfect God who created this good and perfect world, who was he also? Well, the Bible tells us something extraordinary. It says it's Jesus. Jesus, who we often think of as only as a man who died on the cross and rose again, he was actually the creator. So we read about this in the opening words of John's Gospel, John chapter 1 verses 1 to 3. It says, in the beginning was the Word, which is a way of saying Jesus. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Through him all things were made. Through who? Through Jesus all things were made. There's this other really great small book in the New Testament called Colossians, and it says in Colossians chapter 1 verse 16, for through him all things were made, things in heaven and in earth, things visible and invisible. Through who? Through Jesus. So suddenly if you're trying to believe that the Creator had a choice, and instead of choosing to make the world perfect, actually chose to make it so that the world had to go through millions and millions of years of death and suffering, well, what's that going to do to your view of Jesus? It may weaken it. So I hope that gives you a bit of an introduction about why does this matter? What's this topic important? Why are we spending so much time on it here? I hope, and the rest of the team hopes, that if you don't already know Jesus, that as a result of these talks covering everything from statistics through to malaria, that you'll give Jesus good consideration. And if you already love Jesus and you believe in this mixture of this syncretism, and some of you may have done that for years, and you're wonderful Christians, you're self-sacrificing, you're serving, you're passionate about Jesus, you love talking to him. I hope at the end of this that we may be able to persuade you to have even more reasons to love and admire Jesus at the end of the Seriously seminars. So thank you very much. End of break one, the beginning of break one. Feel free to stand up, please. Actually, I'm a physiotherapist, so you've got to stand up. Yeah.